Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Switch for having us here, IEEE and Computer Society for sponsoring us. We're delighted to present technology predictions for times of pandemics. Uh, Even though it's only five of us here presenting, it is really much bigger team that contributed to this. And you can see all these ladies and gentlemen on the picture. This work hasn't started just for the pandemics. We have been doing technology predictions for quite some time, almost 10 years. And predicting the future is never easy. It always entails a degree of uncertainty, guessing, and luck. Predicting technology trends is even harder because it entails both technical and business acumen. And it's not always that the best technology wins because it does depend on adoption, productization, and many other aspects. We felt that our role was distinguishing a fashion from a true trend. And in the process, it resulted of a number of new types of publication, which are usually press releases, lightweight, short, a paragraph per prediction. We've been doing it approximately since 2010, and it gained a lot of visibility in the broader world market. And our predictions surpassed all our expectations. To show you some examples how these predictions work in the past, I would like to bring up this slide, which shows the scorecard for the last 4 years. I don't expect you to read all of these elements. And as you can see, our predictions range somewhere between B and A+. I would like to point out, though, that we were pretty successful in certain cases, like with virtual reality, which evolved eventually in assisted reality, and then again, augmented reality, or with machine learning, accelerators, deep learning, and deep learning accelerators. But we also had a fair share of missed predictions. That was true for non-volatile memory, disaggregated memory, and it's not because these technologies were wrong or unsuccessful. There's that element of the time where it just wasn't the right time for non-volatile memory to show up, and we'll see that in the future they're coming back again. And the same is true for security, digital currencies, and others. What is interesting, though, is that in certain years, we were very successful according to our scorecard, only to be unsuccessful the following year. The case in point is blockchain and then digital currency.
The technology evolution tends to be exponential, but when you are talking about a very short time frame, is actually a little bit more linear. And this has been shown in considering this very special year, very strange year, where our predictions were about AI for critical systems, additive manufacturing, cognitive skill for robots, legal related implications to reflect security and privacy, and so on. You see all of these listed in the slides. And when we were struck by the pandemics and the effect of the pandemics, the lockdown and all this kind of thing, well, what the industry did was basically use what they have available. And so it's not surprising that this kind of prediction really hold, and we're just focused much more in the area of interest. So as an example, AI on the edges turned out into a tremendous growth of in situ collecting and analyzing information about patients, or whether legal implication was turned into protecting citizen privacy with enabling national privacy policies and so on.
So let's take an example, and that is AI machine learning applied to cybersecurity prediction summaries. So cybersecurity is a key risk for any business or organization today. There's a growing attack surface, particularly with a lot of people at home, which includes amateur threats such as phishing, sophisticated distributed denial of service attacks, and skilled nation-state actors. Prevention is really, really hard. Given enough time, attackers can be able to be successful because the cost of attack is low, automatic probing is easily done, and often eventually finds a weakness. Advanced persistent threats shows that hackers can be very patient. And since a lot of the work is actually done by machines, it's easier to be patient. Defense depends on security analysts, who are rare in most organizations. And without adequate training, people in an organization are often unable, sometimes fall to phishing attacks, things of that sort. And also, this is mitigated by high turnover rates and that sort of issues. So AI and machine learning can help with detection of threats across an enterprise, can provide you with, if you will, borrowed expertise and make recommendations to security analysts. And it can drive down response times from hundreds of hours to seconds, and allow analyst effectiveness from 1 to 2 instances to thousands daily. With an adequate knowledge base behind this AI, it can preserve corporate knowledge and use that knowledge to automate tasks and to train new analysis. And applying artificial intelligence, machine learning to cybersecurity requires partnering of industry, academia, and government on a global scale. And the annual Cybersecurity Grand Challenge can help capture cyber analyst behavior while automating AI in a standardized manner and make it available globally.
Okay, this is a very interesting graph that we put together. We just put the impact of each one of the prediction, the impact, the confidence that we have, the likelihood that something would happen, and we just put everything in on one chart. We assume that it would have a high impact, and this is the case. On the other hand, when you look on the likelihood, you find out that there are few technology that actually happen or a high likelihood to happen, and other technologies which are lag behind. And for the technology that lag behind, we can see, for example, quantum computing, that many people are talking about the great impact that it would happen, but its progress quite slow. We can see about the non-volatile memory. Non-volatile memory is widely used for storage, for memories, but at least the expectation were that it will be used for in-memory computations and for other purposes, and this not yet happened. And even for AI cyber, there are many conferences and workshops and papers, but there are quite a few products in the market, and this is the reason that the impact right now is that the likelihood right now is quite low. On the other hand, if it would happen, so the impact will be very, very high, and we still believe that the confidence that it would happen is very high. On the other hand, of course, AI age and other technology are here and are happening, so they are on the right upper quarter of the chart.
As FDC, we have a process of looking into new areas for exploring something that is not particularly specific to a society, but that actually goes across several societies. And this process foresee that in March, basically, we are starting discussing the possible areas of intervention, as you see in the slides. However, March was really at the very beginning of the epidemics, so we didn't take that into account. Now we are in the last phase of this selection process, and actually what FTC is going to discuss today, as a matter of fact, is projects about telepresence, about smart lighting, and low Earth orbit satellites. So it's quite a divergence from the list that we had there, but it makes sense because it's the whole process of evolution of digesting the proposal, and now we are focused on these 3 new ones.
So technology predictions are important in times of like this, where we're in a pandemic. And let's explain why. First of all, a situation like this has created stress on the way we work, our existence, our values, and our daily lives, ultimately. We have to trade off privacy versus societal benefits, for instance, in contact tracing. How do we work together, in a time when we can't actually get together? And then there's a whole issue of supply chain logistics, particularly if places are impacted by COVID and manufacturing issues. Where do you get stuff to how do you keep your factory working? So this has actually resulted in the acceleration of trends towards what's called digital transformation. It was forced upon work, education, and private life. And technologies play in a very crucial role in implementing this digital transformation. It's essentially become essential for our survival and for many people to be able to continue working. So predicting these technologies will help us to understand how we can react to situations like the current pandemic. And let's give some cases where this is true. We can use technologies for high performance computing, for instance, in doing vaccine discovery, understanding the relationships of the COVID virus and its sensitivities, simulating the spread of the virus, perhaps creating technical solutions that deal with privacy versus intellectual property sharing, and a number of other different situations that we can deal with, all mitigated and enabled by technology. And we've seen enormous changes in our technology, use of the cloud, for example, as a result of that.
And here is our list of top technology predictions at times of pandemics. It consists of high-performance computing, genomics analytics, tracking surveillance, medicine, supply chain elasticity, food production and delivery, remote presence, connectivity, especially 5G, behavioral sciences, and sharing IP. And we have put them in this quasi-architectural diagram with some core technologies, which has HPC and connectivity at the bottom, all the way up to legal and social aspects, including behavioral sciences and sharing IP. And then everything else in between, classified as applied technologies and industry verticals. We must admit that this was our personal bias, but there's a reason why we put high performance computing. And let's expect each one of these in a little bit more detail. With respect to high performance computing, and for that matter, everything else, all other technologies, we discuss them in terms of problems, demand, opportunities, impact, and then what is sustainable solution or business opportunity that goes beyond just the times of pandemics. How can this stick and be useful to the world and humankind? For high performance computing specifically, problems and demand consist of substantial need for broad set of simulations. So in order to come up with vaccines, someone needs to simulate what is really useful for the humans to prevent. But it's also useful in other aspects, such as supply chain, people movement, and others. Problem is also that computation is reaching the limits because of the end of Moore's law. In terms of opportunities, there's AI for science in the United States, and there's equivalent movement in the rest of the world, in Europe, in Asia Pacific. There's also opportunity for in situ analytics at the edge, where the patients come and get analyzed. And then there's a lot of opportunities for new types of computing, memories, interconnect, etc. In terms of impact, you can see that it's really an absolutely essential in order to get the shorter time to COVID vaccine. But it can also increase our confidence in terms of predictions, when to close up whole countries, businesses, etc. In terms of longer term business opportunity, there's this global competition, meaning both cooperation and competition on exascale, post-exascale between these three regions of the world. There's opportunity for advances in AI machine learning, an imminent hardware accelerator market consolidation, delivery of low to mid-range high performance computing as a service. And then there are enablers and inhibitors. In terms of enablers, it's new types of accelerators. In terms of inhibitors, it's this never-ending issue of the end of Moore's law and then obsolete programming models.
Genomics Analytics is an excellent example of how our society can help in solving real problems. Because in theory, at least, Genomics Analytics could solve and will solve some major issues about how we treat health in general and how we improve the quality of life for people. For example, all the issues of personalized medicine. Different people are reacting differently to medicine. How we treat new viruses, how we treat a new threat to the world. Most likely, the solution will be, at least in part, by using more sophisticated genomic analytics. So the opportunities are endless, but the major problem that I can see, or we can see, is that it requires a lot of interdisciplinary work between different scientists, and then only after we solve the communication between the scientists, most likely we will get the real impact. So if we look on the market today, first of all, we see a very huge growth of the market, 95% growth in genomic analytics over the last 8 years. But we also see that the demand is still outperforming supply, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make this tool more effective and to be able to help more people and in a faster way.
The next trend involves questions of tracking and surveillance. While at the time that we were making these predictions, we obviously weren't aware of the looming pandemic that would change our society in material ways. And so this prediction is particularly interesting because on the one hand, it channels the questions of internet business models that have been prevalent since the beginning of the mainstreaming of internet commerce. But when you look at questions of tracking and surveillance in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic today with hindsight, we see that there's a double-edged meaning to this particular prediction. Surveillance and tracking, while generally a point of concern for consumers and a point of return on investment for some technology companies, today we think about them also in terms of the surveillance of public health needs and the tracking of viral spread. And so when we think about this prediction, it demonstrates at least three dynamics that permeate all of our predictions. The first is the social contingency, the evolving social environment and the way that the arrival of an unexpected pandemic has changed the technology interplay and the dynamics of the humans involved is something that is obvious in the way that this prediction and its engagement has changed over time. The second is the dynamic of political and legal questions. As we know from the way that the pandemic has played out, there's been a sometimes unexpected politicization around some technologies for health. And there's been a set of new proposals around the use of technologies that didn't necessarily exist previously to help us track the pandemic. The last dynamic that has cropped up is the importance of tracking emergent and intersections that arise when these dynamics of social, technology, and legal political questions intersect. And so as we go through all of these predictions, you see that in the COVID-19 crisis, we sort of have a microcosm of many of the different themes that we've discussed. Today, we see misinformation happening around COVID-19, bringing up questions of security. The questions of connectivity are key to the ability of tracking applications for disease spread. The questions of supply chain integrity raise questions of the ability of, for example, hospital systems to successfully defend against different attacks that may be leveraging the COVID-19 crisis by our adversaries in a time of chaos. And so as we see in this one prediction, all of our trends, while visible, they nevertheless have sometimes morphed without an expectation on our part. And so they were both prescient and under-inclusive in some ways. And that's the joy and pain of predictions.
Medicine has been suffering from a stress situation, lack of resources and so on, which is not surprising since with medicine, you have to balance the results with the economic situation. And you plan for average, and the peak, the pandemic is actually working on peaks. So that's not surprising at all. What was clearly manifested was the fact that by moving to the cyberspace, you can save a lot and you can provide much better cure. And that was done and was seen by telemedicine. We have seen a tremendous increase in telemedicine services. We've also seen by using data with all the issues about privacy and so on, but they can make a difference. We have seen in Taiwan, were able to discover that something was not right well before there was an announcement of a pandemic. And we have seen all these apps coming up for tracking and monitoring what's going on. We have seen digital twins starting to be used in Singapore, in Taiwan, in Korea, and they have been proposed in Europe as a one way of attacking this problem.
Supply chain extreme elasticity is the next prediction. I always like to think of the following quote: "Supply always comes on the heels of demand," by Robert Collier. The only pandemics have shown us how much we are interconnected. So at the time of the first closeout of countries such as China, then Europe and US and the rest of the world, many corporations have suffered due to product manufacturing, but also due to the closeout of travel, restaurants. Agricultural products have been impacted because there was no demand for them, so that supply had to be thrown away. And we realized that we really need to redesign our supply chains from ground up for this extreme elasticity, to be able to quickly start certain things when they're needed and to stop them when there's no more demand. If we are successful with this, we can reduce costs dramatically in the long term and also have more flexibility in bidding to different suppliers and providers. This, in summary, will make industries much stronger, and in a way will democratize marketplaces, resulting in much more robust production. Enablers for this include global and flexible markets and AI at edge, which can collect information, and inhibitors is really this huge lack of predictability.
Food production and delivery is another example of a supply chain, but here we are the producer and the consumer are using the products. And it can be globally and locally. The problem can be in the state or between countries. And the problem under the epidemic region is even worse. When the epidemic actually made the fear that, for example, distribution of viruses and so on, and then there are a lot of regulation and a lot of constraints about it that cause a waste of food, a waste of product, etc. But this is also a great opportunity to increase globalization of food if we plan it properly. It increases the need and the opportunity to have a better way to deliver food to homes, etc., and improve packing in other technologies.
So remote presence is another one of these projections which has direct relevance today. With the pandemic, travel has been very constrained. Very few people can travel. They aren't able to make it to in-person events, meetings, conferences, person-to-person business discussions, and direct sales. And physical presence is very desired in a lot of areas, in fact, required mostly in areas such as surgery, evaluation of patients, deep technical discussions, customer meetings, etc. And large-scale events, including conferences, sports, and various other events, have been canceled, closed down, or severely restricted as a result of the pandemic. This has led to the broader development and creating more robust tools for online events and meetings, such as Zoom, WebEx, and various others. They've been able to step up to the increasing scale of communication that people have been doing. The security has gotten better, and they're generally getting easier to use. And as more and more people use these resources for more things, people become both more comfortable and also more proficient, and the tools themselves will improve. This will have a benefit for telemedicine, people working, online meetings, things of that sort, which probably many of us have already been participating in. but it leads to potentially a complete redesign of our work style, the way that we do meetings, the way we meet with customers, even the way that we interact with each other. And the technology will have to develop in order to mitigate and provide a more immersive, more personal experience. Another example is teaching. Teaching both at the lower level and even at universities in many areas has been going online. So as a consequence of this, a lot more of us are getting experience working at home. We're actually finding that we can get a lot of things, not everything, and it's not quite the same, but we can get a lot of stuff done. This probably will lead to some greater use of a remote work, remote presence in the future because of that increased familiarity. And a lot of, even in artists and media and entertainment area that I do some work in, a lot of people have found that using technology tools like green screens and things of that sort, they can effectively work together remotely. And so many artists have used tools like this. And there's new business models also being driven by remote delivery, for instance, instead of in-person presence or interactions of various sorts. Sports events been in the U.S., for instance, they've been trying to bring these back up. They've had some success, but it involves people interacting. In a time pandemic, that could be an issue. But could we see, and we've seen reduced audiences, additional protection for performers, and in general, I think it's a real encouragement or a goad for the development of new technologies and leading to new business opportunities. Networking is a core enabler, and we will end up with new tools and new methods for doing that. Delicate functions, things that often require direct and immediate interaction, like surgeries. Maybe we'll find better tools that allow telepresence robots to be able to do this, perhaps. Real-time response to operate remote arms. Quality user interfaces, and ways in which we can create more immersive environments, perhaps eventually volumetric imaging and holographic display systems, if we look at the future, can replace the need for many in-person meetings and provide us with ways of avoiding travel and having immediate capability of interacting with others. These will be enabled by smart, fast networks, sophisticated user interfaces, and just basically experience and finding synergies and interactions between technologies that allow us to work better. The inhibitors, of course, are good connectivity to the home. And so providing that to more people will be important. Tail latencies, which might be dealt with by having more edge resources, and also being able to provide real-time-like experiences and creating a greater sense of reality.
As just mentioned, connectivity has played a major role, and it was easy to predict that connectivity will keep increasing and providing more performances. What we have seen actually after the pandemic and the lockout is the fact that the demand for services has increased tremendously. Something like Zoom has increased 56 times from before to after the pandemic on the wireless network, and 82 times from the fixed line. Surprisingly, in a way, the network has been resilient, and we have seen that operators have been able to double the core network capacity in a matter of days. In Italy, in 2 days, Vodafone have moved the backbone from 2.7 terabit per second to 4.4, and Telecom Italia from 4 terabit per second to 8.8. And that took just a few days. So we have a network now deployed that can really sustain this peak in an amazing way. And of course, new facilities like 5G will provide even more.
The pandemic has led us to more knowledge, I think, of ourselves and of our society as well. We've run into issues such as with increased virtual presence, social networking. We've also created venues and ways in which people with malicious intent can reach more people. And when people are stressed out and there's a lot of concern, they're looking for information, and providing reliable information and letting people know what's true and not true is an extremely important issue. So information, guidance, policies, and capabilities need to be built into our network and communication means to let people know what's true and what's not, or to be able to make their own decisions. So there's opportunities here in terms of computer science, using AI, sociology, and understanding the way that people work to be able to use behavioral science to help us to provide better tools for people to find out what's true or not. We could use these tools then to provide education, to encourage positive behavior, and to mitigate fears, unfounded fears, and perhaps to provide real concerns for people so they understand that. There's possibilities of using something called digital twins technology, where we emulate, where in effect we're emulating something so well that we can do a model on it that reflects very well on how the actual thing would work. Could this help us in understanding this? This will have a direct impact on government communications, but our own communications and our press as well. And allow us to interplay also with cybersecurity in order to protect against misuses. So there's a lot of business opportunities here. Corporate behavior, consumer behavior, the way the media works, the way that we access information. There's a huge demand for this, but there needs to be both work within industry and also government for compliance and auditing.
Final trend involves the sharing of intellectual property. While the dominant business model in technology companies has generally been proprietary with respect to intellectual property, seeking to maximize and leverage in a controlled way, the pandemic in particular highlights the need for cooperation and for us to consider other concerns such as the good of society on a collective basis because of the shared stability needs of the economy as a whole. So the pandemic and these questions of shared intellectual property and licensing are worth taking another look at, particularly with our reframed sense of shared social challenge, and to recognize that we have opportunities for building in ways that are not necessarily in line with the traditional intellectual property maximalist models that were the mainstay of the 1980s and 1990s and 2000s.
So let's put together all the technology on the same chart as before. And as we can see, all the technology do have high impact. And the likelihood, we can see that, of course, quite obvious, the HPC is on the right corner, right up corner. I wish that the Genomics Analytics will be in a better position, but it's still in the right quarter of the graph. What more bothers me is the tracking in the civilians. And here I believe that the position of the tracking and the civilians is because we want, or we still to do it in such a way that will preserve privacy, and the people who need to support or to give money to such research and development don't have the enough motivation in order to encourage this kind of research. But we all believe that in the future we'll see improvement not just with the means of how to track to the civilians operation, but also how to do it in more privacy way and in more secure way.
Okay, as a general observation, we have seen that companies have adjusted impressively to the new situation. However, something that was clear was the fact that the processes were not fit to operate in the cyberspace in general. So they needed to change their process, and this is a long-term endeavor. We also saw that the supply chain in the very beginning got stuck, and they had to find a different way for getting supply. But we have also seen in the longer term the demand has changed. And this is a structural change in demand in some areas that, as listed in the slides, will take some time to recover. And in some cases, it will not recover at all. So that will be a profound change that we will be living with as a result of the pandemic and the lockout.
So in summary, we would like to conclude that technology is really critical at times of pandemics, but the opposite is also true. Pandemics also help aggressive technology evolution. As people used to say, necessity is mother of invention. Technology predictions were always popular, but now they are becoming increasingly useful. When to close businesses, when the next wave will come, and many other important aspects. We continue to experiment with different approaches and delivery models of these predictions, and we are becoming much more systematic and rigorous in our predictions. We would also like to hear from you. Do you agree with our predictions? Have we missed anything? What is wrong? What is different? Please feel free to approach me or my colleagues with feedback and questions, and you can find the pointers to us. Thank you very much.